All right, welcome to Shop Talks. We're going to talk about the transformation of the garment industry. How do you like that for a big topic? We're going to be here for like 12 or 14 hours. And that's just Alex talking. So we really have a unique opportunity here to hear some visionaries in the field of garment production with so much experience, and honestly, you're really lucky to get their wisdom. So we have Alex Phelan, who is from merchandise and has a long history in all aspects of the garment industry. We've got Alex Young, who is from Pond, and he's more of an actual garment manufacturer. And then we have Jason Murphy, who's from Sanmar and part of their decorating team and has another aspect to be covered. So, you know what? And I want to thank the sponsors, which are Hanes and Impressions. And I'm from the Ink Kitchen, which is a free source of information. This is all be videotaped, and you can watch it for free later. All right, Alex, take it away, actually. Just tell them what you were telling me.
All right. So I've had a pretty unique experience in what I would call this industry, which I think has different terms depending on who you talk to. Some people call it the decorated apparel industry. Some people might call it the promotional products industry, or retail, manufacturing, or whatever. I think of it as the branded merchandise space, and it's about a $70 billion market globally. So my experience in this space has been very uniquely tied to print on demand. I was involved in print on demand with a company called Teespring since 2012. I kind of got to see the growth of print on demand as it sort of exploded with Facebook and social media and internet marketers, kind of creating this new market for customized products and branded merch.
Want to give people an idea how big that was? How big was Teespring at the biggest?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh. When we discovered selling shirts on Facebook, or when the Facebook sellers discovered Teespring, it kicked off a 40% month-over-month growth rocket ship that lasted for like 15 months. So I think we went from doing like a few thousand shirts a month to like 1 million shirts a month in less than a year. And so I was the guy that was trying to find screen printers to take this volume and do the fulfillment piece, so just doing the e-com fulfillment piece of like taking screen print orders and breaking them down into individual orders with shipping labels on them is already not compatible with how most screen print and embroidery shops work, and also how most of the branded merch space orders products. So it was already kind of like square peg, round hole from the beginning, right? And so we were trying to find a solution that allowed us to produce with no minimums, driven by computers, so we can feed digital images into it, print them on demand, and ship them very quickly to e-commerce customers, all through a platform that we were running. So that's kind of how we found DTG and DyeSub and these other digital technologies that really started kind of overtaking the conversation around e-commerce and POD. But I was also kind of inside on trying to use that same model for brands. And when I was doing that, when we would do that in 2013, 2014, talking to the traditional elements within branded merch, promotional products distributors, brands, buyers, any type of entity that's operating on the traditional retail cycle, they really had various reactions of not kind of understanding POD or really looking at it and saying, yeah, the quality is not good enough for us, the cost is too high, we're not software engineers that can integrate to every API in the world, and this is working over here. So, we've got our $70 billion big blue ocean that's just, not skipping a beat every single year. And so it was very difficult to even enter into the conversation, as a POD company. And that's where I think the growth that we've seen in POD has been primarily driven by internet marketers and creators and influencers and platforms and marketplaces that are not brands. And the entities that really make the branded merch space go are primarily brands. And everybody has a different definition of brand. I kind of define it as a likeness, right? Some sort of likeness that's being represented on a custom product that people are buying, right? And the likeness is the brand. The likeness is the entity that's accountable for the quality, accountable. It's your name on a product or your company's name on a product. And that's really where I saw a lot of incompatibility in POD. And the primary reasons for that were quality, consistency, cost, not being able to order products in a way that brands are typically used to, not being able to have serve professional services that brands might need. At the end of the day, every type of branded merch business is really just a team of people that are taking highly subjective information and refining it into something objective that everybody says, yes, this is good, and when the customer gets it, everybody has a smile on their face, right? And in promo, you have proofs and PPDs, and PPDs work with decorators, and some of this I'm going to be generalizing because I'm not deep in that world, but this is what I'm seeing from a high level. On the retail side of things, you're ordering in a very similar way, right? It's buyers and planners and decorators and very similar cast of characters that's involved, except oftentimes this is operating on an 8 to 12 month cycle. So this is something that I learned over the last few years, just kind of the norms in branded merch and how most of the big business works. So within how products are made and how they're sold and how they're distributed, the North Star is really the unit cost. And that's kind of been the North Star since globalization, right? And that's how we ended up with these 8 to 12 month retail cycles where you're arbitraging a bunch of raw materials through a bunch of different countries and trying to get to a finished product on a shelf 8 to 12 months later. And with COVID, what we saw happening with COVID was right when it hit. It was in March 2020, and this is when a lot of the big brands and a lot of their suppliers, like decorators and mills and all the raw material elements that go into serving these brands, were at one of the riskiest moments in the retail cycle, where a lot of their products had to be produced and finished and sitting on docks for Christmas. So this is for me being an on-demand person, I'm like, whoa, wow, you got to make millions of dollars worth of stuff 8 months in advance and put it on a dock in March or whatever so that it can be in a Walmart at Christmas. Wow, that doesn't seem very efficient. And so what happened was, or at least overwhelmingly, right? Not in every case, but overwhelmingly, a lot of brands did not pick up that order. And it was because of this, fear and anxiety around COVID, right? There's a global pandemic. We didn't know what stores were going to be open, what this disease was going to do to humanity. We didn't, everybody was scared. And so by not picking up those orders, there was this initial mass destruction in the traditional retail supply chain that really hasn't come back. A lot of these factories have closed because of not being able to get paid for these orders. There was hurricanes in Central America, and then the big driver, and the thing that I'm going to talk a lot about in this talk is e-commerce as a percentage of retail here in the United States went from about 11.5% before COVID to roughly 16.5% in about 6 months. That represented what would have been a multi-year increase in e-commerce's acceleration into retail that happened in about 3 months. right? And so when you have these traditional retail cycles that are on an 8 to 12 month cycle, and some of the raw material cycles are on even longer cycles, right? The dyes and the fabrics and all this other stuff. It's like this massive catastrophe, right? That changes everything. And so what we saw was not necessarily this increased demand for POD or brands moving away from screen printing into POD and wanting to do everything on demand. It was brands being forced into e-commerce because e-commerce is now the new norm. The e-commerce storefront is the storefront of the future, or maybe the metaverse, I don't know, but e-commerce for now. But basically, if a brand doesn't have a good strategy around e-com, and e-com is not like the primary channel for them, they're now incentivized to make that happen. And one of the ways to make that happen is print on demand, right? But what brands realize when they come and they see print on demand is that it's very incomplete from what they need for their brand, right? Usually from a product perspective, oftentimes from a flexibility around, the way that the products are being sold, the customization of the e-commerce, not being able to print on certain fabrics, not being able to, have custom packaging and finishing elements and, the quality that they're used to. So in POD, the North Star is printing, producing one of something, not having any inventory, not having any batches. And for a brand that might have an 8 to 12 month retail cycle where they're accruing, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of inventory, well, that's not necessarily their North Star. Their North Star is getting an e-com solution with a supply chain that makes sense, and not sacrificing any of the elements of their product. That's non-negotiable, right? So I've seen this time and time again. I've been trying to work with the traditional branded merch space with POD for a very long time, kind of culminating with me just starting an e-com platform for brands and trying to use POD as the hook to get that done, and it not working. And it always came back to quality, consistency, service, and really just being able to interface with a supply partner in a way that they're used to. So it's a long-winded way of saying that I think we're living in a time right now that presents the biggest opportunity within our industry that certainly we've ever seen in our lifetimes, might see in multiple lifetimes, and it might even be the biggest transformation in how products are made, sold, and distributed since, I don't know, globalization or the Industrial Revolution. I don't know. I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg, so it's hard to see what that's going to look like, but I think it's going to happen faster than we could all have imagined. The good news is, the $70 billion space that is being forced to convert, that is going to convert, it's going to convert to e-commerce, and it's going to convert at such a fast pace where we're going to need the cooperation of all the traditional elements in the supply chain. So screen printing, embroidery, custom packaging, UV, CAD cut vinyl, all these other things that are non-negotiable from an output perspective for the brand are needed, and they're needed fast. But right now, a lot of those pieces aren't compatible not because they're not POD, it's because they're not compatible with e-commerce. You know what I mean? So if we just use e-commerce as the North Star, and we start to look at supply chains that can drive efficiencies from an e-commerce front end, primarily using onshore manufacturing, onshore and nearshore raw materials for all of our products, right? I mean, a big, AY can speak to that a little bit, I think, about some of the changes that he's made in his shop, and just to be much more regionally efficient. And so
this has an opportunity to be more cooperative, more egalitarian, and more sustainable. It's not necessarily going that way, but the opportunity is there, correct?
I believe so. I think that there's this fear that e-commerce is like this like Amazon Big Brother like kind of thing that's just going to crush us all.
Too bad Kevin wasn't here, huh?
I know, right? We would have had a lot of fun with
We
him.
were going to have an Amazon guy here.
Next year, we'll get him up here, and you guys can all send him this, and we can laugh about it. But basically, it's e-com is coming no matter what, right? And it requires re-engineering the ecosystem within branded merch. And now things have to be made faster. They need to be made domestically. So it presents this incredible opportunity for all 37,000 screen printers in the United States and however many other embroidery shops. Jason, you can probably speak to the total number of all the decorators in the United States.
We can. So I can vouch for a lot of what he's saying, and I could say the biggest thing that we saw
Eat your mic more.
near 2020, right as all this happened, we saw a huge downslide, right? Everybody did. And then we saw this uptick. And this uptick, we had customers that were doing little bits. All of a sudden, huge growth, and we're going, okay, what's happening here? We get them on the phone, hey, thank you. Is everything going good? What's happening? Yeah, I got into print on demand. I got into this social space. I got into this website. I got into that website. And they started off with one single DTG. Some of these folks now have 10 or 12. And they took that opportunity to reinvest. And yeah, we actually rebranded. The team that I'm on used to be called Decorator Relations. And my boss said, you know what? We're actually Decorator and Digital Solutions Group because we're working with internet retailers at what we call that space. The amount of growth we saw there was tremendous, absolutely tremendous. So I do invite everybody, please come and join that space. Look for platforms like what Merchandise is doing because it's going to help you grow.
So Alex, you actually make things, which is a crazy talk, right?
Yeah, don't do it.
You want to talk a little bit about how your business is being transformed and how you're trying to get with this, catch this wave?
Yeah, so at Pond Threads Manufacturing, we're a vertically integrated die sub cut and sew micro factory locally here in Orange County. What COVID really did for us that was a struggle was onboard customers faster. What has changed is how do we manage that expectation? You can onboard a brand. We do a lot of athleisure and swimwear. You can onboard a brand that has nothing, and they can scale up to needing 10,000 units done in a day. How do you manage those expectations so that on-demand, the addiction of it, hasn't allowed us to do? We all want those big orders, but we can't produce them. And if we can't produce them, the consumer is going to be extremely unhappy, and you're going to lose that brand, and they're going to go to the next on-demand provider that's going to get ground down. And so our angle and our selling point is our quality. I only use the best sewers that are local, and they are in-house. And then the materials we source where we can get the best. My supply chain was broken in COVID. And we looked at what we were doing, and we looked inwards. So local mills in LA. We source fabrics from Central America. We're big brand source. So we can take and incubate brands, whether we started out owning our own brands because the supply chain before COVID, it was broken. We couldn't get the things made if we needed to do one, or we had to do 50 or 5,000. We couldn't service the consumer in the way we wanted to offer uniqueness. So we built it on our own and then offered out our services to other brands, whether they're a large drink brand, alcohol brand, or if they're a small local niche brand. What it's allowed us to do is take control of the process and look really inwards in the country and nearshore, so that we can help brands scale here with solutions here. And what's really great about that is that we can tap into a supplier network as well and feed business through technology. I would not be as successful as we have been if we didn't put technology in place to manage our production. So touch point tracking, QR code tracking, so that every piece we know where it is, when it is. We specifically in sewing, we let the sewers shine with what they do. They don't want to figure out how to make it. they want to run as fast as they can and make as fast as they can because that's what they want. And then also incentivizing your staff as well. We pay our people a premium because we know they're good at what they do, but then they also have a bonus system in place so that if instead of getting 10 pieces out a day, they get 300 out a day. And at the end of the month, at the end of last year, we had 25 people that were paid an extra $500 right before Christmas because they're incentivized to do it. And these are things around, but if you enable your staff to work for you and with you on quality and speed and all these things that the brands rely on us to do, we have a great solution that makes these brands not look outward, not look to China. Made in USA is a real thing that you can do here. Yes, it's more expensive, but they can touch it and feel it and watch it, and that's what we want.
I think also you're able to take a bigger piece of what's a pretty big pie, especially when people are selling online, and there was always money there.
Right.
It's just only a couple people were taking it.
Exactly.
And now that's different.
Yeah.
I want to talk about switch gears a little to the decoration, which both of you are well aware of. So it seemed like the holy grail for a while was how fast you could print things. That is not it anymore. Am I correct? Like, it's not. Now it seems like it's more like information, and so maybe we want to talk about what Sanmar is doing, what you see, and now it's like, how do I get this design on the proper shirt
Right.
at the proper time
Exactly.
and send it to the right place? And
Exactly.
where the hell is it coming from?
Yeah.
And like that informational nexus seems more important now than ever.
Yeah, exactly. Because even the name POD, right, print on demand, it's only one tiny part of what needs to happen in the entire equation, right? The printing is the final piece typically that usually happens in a very long retail cycle. So the North Star for POD platforms and internet marketers is getting that print as fast as possible, but it's not the North Star for brands, especially brands that have an 8 to 12 month retail cycle, right? So if you can shorten that into like a 0 to 3 month retail cycle with that cuts out a lot of the intermediaries and all the kind of any portion of that supply chain that's not adding value to it in some way, and they're extracting value from the total pie, eliminate those and remove as many cogs between the brand, which is the entity that's creating the value, and the suppliers, which are the entities that are delivering on that value expectation, which includes suppliers like Sanmar, decorators, packaging companies, raw material companies. All of those are value add components of that supply chain.
So I would say the big thing that we're looking at is how we can make you more efficient, right? And so that's always been a big thing. DTG is so big right now and it's so heavy. DTF is coming up real quick behind it. In last year, well, for the last 2 years, my project has been figuring out how can I have a ready-to-print DTG shirt. And we launched a tri-blend last year, and it was a tremendous success. So out of the box, you print, you press it, throw it on your machine, and you print, and it was a winner. So from there, we went from that. We have a cotton that just launched last week. So I think on the print-on-demand space, to be able to have the smaller places, not have to worry about pre-treat, you have a basic set of shirts that you can go and you can pump out day in and day out, that's going to help a lot. So I think that was point number one. But watching what's happening with DTG today, where you go from these great brothers and Epsons to the Oval Jets that are out there that just do a tremendous amount of shirts. The production is crazy. It's really what you want. You can start with a brother and Epson, and you can grow and scale into pods of machines and all sorts of great technology. But I think the big thing we've all been looking at is how do we tie it all together? What is that technology? I know we talked a little bit about RFID tags, and that's something that we have been looking at, and we're really trying to figure out what is that next step. How can we have an RFID tag in the apparel, sewn into the neck label? You don't see, you don't feel. But not only when you get it, you can track it. What if we can reprogram it? What if you have the ability to reprogram that so as you're going through your shop and it gets to a station, you can scan it and brings up the artwork that you need, right? So those are some technologies that are out there. We're just trying to figure out how can we implement them into the process. So do know we are looking. Yeah, we're not there yet. That's a long process to make a change.
And
If I could interject, because we custom built our software to do all that for us, and as a maker and a decorator or a manufacturer, I like to say, I only want to be manufacturing. I don't want to be figuring out why your design looks like, why you put the wrong color red on your design. That is not my job. My job is to make your product with its print ready. The solutions are out there. The software solutions are out there. Some of them are broken and not ready, but they're coming fast.
Yeah.
That allow you to integrate on your own to your brands, if it's internal or if it's another brand, to feed you the art so that you're building the machine, so that as an owner and an operator, you're looking at scale, not how do I fix this red.
Right. And if you're not sure with art, because a lot of us are beginners in this, okay, if you're not an artist, you don't have a good artist, get people to do it for you. Okay? There's a gentleman back there, raise your hand. His name's Jared, that's Mid-South. They do digitizing, they do conversion, they do all sorts of stuff. And it's not as expensive as people think. I used to have my own business. I used to digitize myself. The day I gave up digitizing, I gained so much efficiency in my shop, so much more time back for me to sell, because it would take me hours to digitize what somebody else can do, and I would have back the next day.
So when someone orders something online, so many pieces are there, like in an online e-commerce. How are you seeing like where your information is going to go, and how's that flow, and who's going to control that information? What are the key elements to make sure that the right shirt gets there, or the right shirt is made, it's decorated in the right way, and it goes to the right place? What's happening with all that information at the moment?
I think from our side, it's really making sure you get what you order. And we all know today the supply chain's a little bit broken. And we appreciate everybody sticking with us on this. We're trying to right that train. But being able to order and know in your mind, I'm going to get what I ordered, is, I think, step number one. And that's up to us to be able to provide you exactly what you ordered accurately. But to be able to take what we ordered and absorb that information through a platform of some sort, I think that is the next big thing that we need to offer, and we are working on, for you to be able to actually get it in. It automatically goes into your system and then moves on to production and can follow your flow all the way through production.
So eventually, I'm hoping I don't have to order the shirts. That
just happens.
Right?
Yeah.
Will that happen, you think, eventually?
Yes, that will happen.
And I think also, to your point, Jason, and just to get philosophical for a second, because I always like to drop in a little philosophy. One of my philosophies is that all happiness and unhappiness lives between the gap between expectations and reality. So mind the gap, right? There's a big gap, not a lot of happiness. There's a small gap, it's a nice, happy, stable place to stand on top of. So,
and don't shop at the Gap.
That's right. That's exactly, yeah. If you just want to be miserable, do that. So anyways, kind of on top of that, like your orders, Jason, at Sanmar, you have lots of different complex blank orders. There could be like individual orders, there could be wholesale orders, there could be orders that you're receiving internally from other mills, and lots of transactional data that needs to be accounted for in that process. Well, in the total branded merch process, you've got all those components, plus the decoration, plus all the other finishing materials, and then plus all the the e-com pieces, the services, all that stuff. So we kind of we've been researching this for a long time and looking at it from a lot of different angles. And what we found was we really just had to build a totally new tech-driven ecosystem. And so, what we put together is kind of the ability to produce any customized e-commerce experience for any type of brand without any limitations around templates or co-branding or any of the other thing. It's totally white labeled for them. And having all of the services that they would need to make that happen in a way that's efficient and they can be applied fractionally to the opportunity. Then having a order management system in the middle of all of that can take all the data that's being generated on the e-com side and can accurately maintain that without any gaps, right? in that middleware that handles all of the other pieces that need to come together in that order, whether that's blank garments, whether it's fabric, whether it's inks, whether it's packaging, whether it's hang tags, swing tags, any type of finishing elements, and delivering those to the decorator side in a way that's very, very efficient and requires, not little to no critical thinking. And also, the other thing that I've learned, being part of developing print-on-demand operations and integrating technologies into e-commerce workflows, in manufacturing, is that there's not an off-the-shelf system for e-commerce workflow of branded merch. There's really not. So if you want to go from any type of custom e-com all the way down to the factory floor on screen print, embroidery, direct to garment, direct to film, anything that you're trying to do, it doesn't really exist. And that's the other piece that I've learned is so critical in order to make this work for everybody, is the compatibility of the decorator with the e-com process. And so that includes, receiving things in a different way than you might be used to. It includes shipping things in a way that you might not be used to. Running multiple processes within your site that you might not be used to. So there's a whole lot of software that needs to be built there. And we believe that our North Star is providing as much value to the brand and the decorator as possible, because we believe that's the most important parts of the entire, the brands and the suppliers, which include decorators, mills, distributors, and all the components that go into that supply chain. And we believe that you have to have kind of systems that can account for each one of those processes. And we're also not selling that system by design at the start, because we're not a SaaS company. It's going to take us a while to develop this ecosystem that can really bring in lots of different types of suppliers under a consistent tech ecosystem that we can train on quickly. And it's also going to take a while to get all of the brands, open to this too. We're not really set up to work with brands that have no customers, and we're not really set up to work with brands like, the mega sports brands that also, they're not compatible with us, because they're essentially rebuilding themselves and trying to make themselves compatible with e-commerce right now. So that's kind of, sorry for a long-winded response, but that's what I think really needs to happen is, the front end, the middle, and the back end all have to be seamlessly integrated, and they need to be compatible with all the components that go into it.
All right, what a dream.
We're living that dream right now.
All right. It is really a transformational time. So
it really is. It's an exciting time. I mean, I think it presents, there's going to be more opportunities in the next 5 years than maybe we've ever seen.
And a lot of maybe possibilities of cooperation instead of
That's right.
Exploitation, I would
Yeah,
say. I mean,
that's right.
I know you're working with a lot of partners globally, but not necessarily taking advantage of them, which has been the traditional model.
Well, so what we want to do is collect the highest customer revenue from the brand, the money that they're charging their end customer, and then we want to distribute that with as little intermediaries as possible. So by having a much more efficient system that's driven by supplier cooperation with vertically integrated technology, you can actually have a much bigger pie for everybody to share. There doesn't have to be all this exploitation and secrecy and, no, don't look at my process and don't look at what this costs and don't, that kind of stuff. And we can all kind of prosper on a more macro level together.
It's interesting, but I just realized when you said that, a long time ago I got to participate in some workshops with this guy, Peter Senge, who was at MIT. And his thing was that the whole nature of management was something based on the Holy Roman Empire, where you have managers of different levels that all controlled the information.
Right.
And so they had the power with that, and with technology, you don't need that. Every part of the sphere can be in contact with every other part.
That's right.
And that's where technology comes in.
Yep.
And that was what he was saying then, and it wasn't really possible,
Yep.
but you could see it was coming, and now it's here.
Right.
So it's a very different model than that hierarchical one.
Yeah, and it's much more sustainable. I think it's better for all of the participants in it that are creating value and adding value, and it's better for society as a whole because we're all incentivized to do things in a much more efficient way.
I would guess less wasteful too, right?
Yeah,
When you're
exactly.
manufacturing garments, right?
When we put technology in place, we eliminated about 30% of our waste, and our efficiency jumped 37% because we could track it and see it. And we're not pulling manual files manually to send to print. We're letting the software do it, and so it's changed how our business has worked, and how we approach the type of customers that we're looking for and the brands that we're working with, and we can build diversity in the products that we make.
All right, let's have a couple of questions here. Who's got a question?
Don't hold back.
Live with the silence here for a minute. All shy? All blown away? No questions, huh? You got lots to digest. That is true. You know what? I found actually when we do these that sort of the deeper the talk, the less the questions. You would think there would be more, but you can kind of see the wheels spinning.
So Rick, you want to throw another one on top of them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you've heard a lot of word about sustainable, right? Sustainable is a big word that people throw around, and a lot of people really don't understand what it means, because sustainability is not necessarily just what you're doing to make the piece, it's what you're doing to treat the people that manufacture it, it's what you're doing in the countries you're in. It's how you get it with less water, less waste. And some of the coolest things I've seen since I've been in this industry is I watched the dye side of this industry go from 13 gallons of water to process 1 pound of fabric down to 3. That's huge. That is a monstrous change in the industry. One thing that Sanmar did at our factory this last, the RE-team, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, all the waste pieces that were cotton were kept. They were separated into different colors, and we made what's called the RE-tee, which is a 100% recycled shirt. And it was so cool to see. None of the lots are going to be exactly the same because it's all recycled through a bunch of different colors. And what if all the blues, we had a lot more navy versus a lot more light, so there's a little bit of change, but it prints really well, and it's a good story. So I want you to think about this when you're telling your story, because when you get into print on demand, people who research you, they're going to want to know your story. And I learned this from my kids. They go online, and when they want to buy something, the first place they go is YouTube, because they want a real-life testimonial from somebody that I bought this, I like it, it's really cool. And I'm sitting there watching them do this. I'm like, okay, so what do you do next? Well, after I look at it there, then I go to their website and I research it really, really deep, what I like. I said, okay. And then I go onto Amazon. I figure out where I'm going to buy it from because I want to get it for the cheapest I can. And it's like, okay. And before the pandemic, they would actually go look at it in the store. And just like, my gosh. And I said, what are you looking for? I want to know it's sustainable. They're doing it ethically. They treat the people that they work with nicely. And that's this generation today. You have to support that generation because they're your customer now, and they're going to be your future customer. So think about telling your story.
The other thing is about e-commerce is actually the pie being divvied up differently allows for some of those costs to be absorbed, whereas the people at the top were extracting all the money,
Right.
so that maybe organic cotton only costs 80 cents more in a shirt, but for some reason it would cost $4 more when you try to buy it. And so that's changing, and then the fact that if you're charging $25 for a cool shirt, maybe you can just make it be organic because you can absorb that cost.
Exactly.
Or maybe you can get like a little bit more because you're controlling that more and more. And it seems like there's going to be less exploitation, if you will. And there's also less waste just in that when things are printed on demand, it used to be, I remember Jacob telling that story, he had a brand, I think it was Tupac or something like that. They had 30 designs, only 3 sold. In the old model, they would have printed 30,000 shirts, 27,000 of which would have sold like shit, and then the other 3 took off. So they print them on demand is a different thing. There's not all that inventory. You print them all on demand, and then the ones that sell, you start screen printing. And the waste is just minuscule compared to what it used to be.
Yeah, and like so much of that waste is the profit that we're all not getting, right? So like a good example is, me and Alex, I call him AY because we're both Alex, so AP and AY. But one of the things that AY and I have proved in a big way, in a significant way over the last year and a half is even with a much higher unit cost for the brand, sometimes significantly higher, double if not more than what they would get for that same product overseas, is more successful when you can execute, right? And so all these brands, all these athleisure brands, particularly athleisure brands, because they have so much fabric sourcing overseas, they were constantly coming to us saying, all my production for Q4 is, stuck in shipping containers, and we can't produce anything. And so a lot of the brands that would look at the domestic manufacturing and they would just immediately dismiss it from a unit cost perspective, they were coming in droves saying, hey, is there capacity? And when you look at it, if you're selling a $100 legging and you're still getting that same retail quality in a supply chain that's way more efficient with way less cogs in that wheel and way less hands in the pot, then what does it matter? If everybody's still if you're maintaining similar margins and there's just less people involved, isn't that better? And if you can do it on demand and efficient, and support domestic manufacturing, I think it's sort of better on every front.
I think there's also more intelligent bean counting, I would say. There used to be, I remember a friend of mine was printing in Oregon as part of I don't care, I'll slag them, it was Nike, right? Yeah. And they screwed them and they moved all the production overseas for like a nickel, and it's like, that is a dumbass nickel. Like, what about the time to, between the designers and the samples and
right.
the production, and what about all that? Count those beans,
yeah.
which are very hard beans to count.
Right.
It's very easy to say, that costs a nickel less. That's like stupid bean
right.
counting.
Well,
and there was a lot of that, and we didn't control it.
Right.
And now, with it being a little more of an egalitarian system, if you will,
yep.
where a little more small people have a part in it, we can count the beans differently. We can see the end effect
right.
of selling more shirts when you're closer to your end user.
Right. And
if I could make a point before
Alex,
is that the transparency that you have a shop should be a part of who you are. If you're good at something, you shouldn't hide it behind closed doors. So my micro factory is fully certified and licensed, and our doors are open everywhere. They're open all day long. People can come in and touch it and feel it, and they want to, and they get addicted to that because they can come and see you and who you are. If you're really good at what you do, you should allow people to see it and touch it right there and meet with you. It's very reinforcing for them.
All right.
Yeah. Just one last point, kind of on that same subject. This is
going to be the last point.
This is the last one, I promise. Promise. Then you can take my soapbox. But I actually think that I hadn't met a lot of the traditional entities in retail, but when I realized that kind of buyers at like the highest level for the biggest brands, they're not really product people, right? Like, we're all product people. We all like geek out on cool prints and cool shirts and new merch and that kind of stuff. The buyers at the highest level that are really controlling these supply chains, they're like master commodities traders, So they're like knowing about the future spot prices of cotton in every region, and they're trying to take because they're completely motivated by the lowest unit cost with the highest perceived value of quality. And that's the perceived value is the key word there. So I actually think that with this new trend and this new model, we might see the quality bar for products on a macro level go up for everybody as well.
All right, I want to thank Jason Murphy from Sanmar, Alex Young from Pond, and from
he's from Merchandise too. We're
well.
Partners at Merchandise as well.
Merchandise has a booth over there if you want to talk to these guys more. They'll hang out for a few minutes here as well. And Alex Phelan, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rick. Great to see you.
and I want to thank the sponsors, Haynes Impressions and the Inn Kitchen.